When the hotel security slid the black envelope across the desk and asked if I still wanted to go through with it, my fiancé spun so fast his tie slapped his cheek. His sister froze like a statue in sequins. In the ballroom behind us, our families were already finding their seats. The first line of the band's set list drifted through the door. I said, clear as glass, lock the doors, and the manager walked his keyring to the double handles. My fiancé whispered, you don't want to do this. I told him I already had. I didn't plan to be cinematic. I planned to be small and agreeable and soft-voiced, the person his family kept telling me I was so good at being. But red flags don't stay red. They fade into beige routines, and then one day you're holding a black envelope with your name printed in a font that tries too hard to be elegant. I met him 3 years ago, call him L. He had a founder's grin, all teeth and inevitability. First date was coffee that turned into a night walk that turned into breakfast because we forgot to sleep. He said I was quiet lightning, and I remember thinking that was either lines or poetry. He lived inside big plans like other people live inside houses. By month 4 he was sketching an app on napkins. By month 6 his older sister C had me pinned with the kind of hug that's a measurement. She's corporate. Her compliments arrive in bullet points. The first red flag came wrapped in a bow. A surprise party that wasn't for me. C had booked a private room to celebrate how well you're integrating. I didn't know there was something to grade. Everyone brought toasts. L filmed everything on his phone like a proud boyfriend documentary. He kept hinting he had big news. The big news was not the promotion I'd just gotten, or the puppy we'd been talking about. The big news was that he and C had landed a paid pilot for a show. A social accountability experiment podcast aimed at relationship optimization. He said it like a TED Talk. I clapped because the room clapped. I swallowed because my name wasn't in the pitch deck. After the champagne, C cornered me with a folder. Inside, a light NDA to protect process. She said I'd love it. She said their investors would love me. She said it like a weather report. The NDA wasn't heavy, but it did have one sentence that stuck in my teeth. Participant consents to collection of relational data in pursuit of narrative outcomes. I asked what that meant. C laughed, a little too practiced. It means if people act messy, we might tell the story of the mess. That winter, my keys started wandering. My texts found their way into group chats where I wasn't invited. Twice, L forgot to add me to plans, then posted me in them anyway like a collage. I told myself it was clumsy entrepreneurship. I told myself I could be flexible. When he proposed, sweet, kneeling on my rental's linoleum because he said real life should be the backdrop, I said yes. I said it like a promise to the future me who would no longer have to negotiate for space. 2 weeks after the engagement, I came home to find C at my kitchen table with color swatches and a spreadsheet titled Narrative Beats. Row 12 said Pressure Test Loyalty. Column D said Deliverable. I asked what that meant. She smiled like a ledger closing. It's just planning. Every story needs thresholds. My name was on tab 2. L said I was overthinking. He said the show needed structure or it would ramble. He kissed my forehead like a period. That's when the money started moving. I'm not rich. My dad left me a small inheritance with one boundary. It was mine, unmerged, because he'd watched my mother give all her oxygen to a relationship that never learned to breathe on its own. L knew this. We talked about it on night 1. He'd called my dad wise. But one morning my savings showed 3 small transfers out. Microdrips, tagged household test. The sender? A joint account I didn't recognize, open with my name. I thought fraud. The bank said both signatures matched. Both. I didn't sign anything. I asked L. He said it must be a glitch. I asked C. She said, you're protected. The pilot covers contingencies, which is a sentence only a contract could love. That night I lay awake watching the ceiling scroll by and promised myself I would stop apologizing to my gut. I started my own record. Paper copies of things I was told, don't need paper. Photos of whiteboards. Audio clips of planning calls where C used the word arc about my life. When I pushed back, she'd laugh and call me our stealth hero. I told L I wanted off the show. He said we weren't filming anymore. I asked why the mics were still in the guest room, then stopped asking because sometimes you teach people how much silence they're allowed to own. 3 weeks before the wedding, the real hook slid into place. My mom called voice thin. Someone with an unlisted number had told her I'd agreed to monetize our conflict journey. She asked what that meant. I told her it meant I was about to start checking if the smoke was a fog machine. I drove to C's office, rode the elevator with a ficus plant and 2 interns, and walked into a conference room where my name was a bullet on a slide. Episode 3, The Test. The test was simple: will she sign the document? A post-nup framed as founder-friendly, bundling my inheritance into a venture runway with performance metrics and clawbacks. It said phrases like empathy KPI. It read like love had been replaced by an HR portal. The signature line had my name. The timestamp had tomorrow's date. Elle watched me read it with a face like a hand edging toward a fire alarm. I didn't sign. I smiled so wide my cheeks ached and said, "I'll think about it, because people who want a show need a second act." Then I went home and called the bank again. I asked for a list of every account with my name. There were 3. I had opened one. The second joint as I'd seen. The third? A business account where I was listed as advisory talent. The deposits? 2 micro drips and a pending wire from a production company. The memo line, pilot, consent secured. The next morning I walked into our venue and asked for the manager. I explained I needed event security and a guest list printed twice. I asked as politely as I could to be allowed to use the projector before toasts. He asked if this was a surprise. I said, "Yes, but not the kind you're thinking." He slid a black envelope across the desk with a gentle hand like people use with animals they want to keep calm. Inside, he tucked a spare master key in his card in case the night wanted to run. Behind me, the band tuned up. In the hallway, Elle argued quietly. C counted people with her eyes. My mother smoothed the napkin with both palms. I could have let the evening blur into speeches and cake. I could have waited for the microphone to find me and said nice things about the way love looks in candlelight. But the envelope was heavy with everything I tried not to be: certain, prepared, unafraid to make the room uncomfortable. So I stood up. I asked the manager to lock the doors. In the second row, C lifted her phone like a shield and said, careful and bright, "This is off plan." I said, "I know." And I opened the envelope. The room's chatter collapsed like a tent. I walked to the projector, thumbed the HDMI, and let the home screen bloom. A grid of little proofs I'd gathered when I stopped being the version of myself they'd storyboard. The first slide looked harmless. My savings ledger with 3 tiny red minus signs. No context, no accusations. Just subtraction. People stared the way you stare at scratches on a borrowed car. Elle started toward me, palms open. I told him, "Please sit." He froze, then for the first time all year he listened. I clicked to a photo of the joint account application. My signature looped like mine but not mine, the way a forged smile feels both familiar and wrong. A murmur rippled, the ant chorus tuned their throats. I said, "Steady, I did not sign this." C said, "Faster, then it's a clerical error, which is corporate for, it happened, but I dislike the implications." The next slide was a screenshot from the narrative beats sheet. Row 12, pressure test, loyalty. Column D, deliverable. In the far corner, the cell comment bubble with C's initials. If she balks, pivot to scarcity, we. Al shut his eyes like he could dim the brightness of the evidence. I saw his left hand clench. That hand had tucked my hair behind my ear 1,000 times. It looked stranger doing nothing. I moved to audio. A waveform appeared, jagged as a heartbeat. I pressed play. C's voice filled the ballroom. Conflict is a resource. If we manage it, we can own the story. A producer chimed in, chirpy, "Do we have the girlfriend's consent locked?" Pause. Elle's voice, threaded with pride he mistook for care. "She's on board. She's quiet lightning." The waveform ticked on. The room stopped blinking. I kept my voice level as a table. "I'm not on board. I did not consent to being productized under the phrase, relational data in pursuit of narrative outcomes. I'm a person." A cousin I barely know made a small sound like a dropped spoon. My mother had stopped breathing in that particular mom way. I watched her place her hand flat against her chest and start again. C stood without asking permission from gravity. "You're mischaracterizing a pilot," she said, and even the word pilot sounded like a wing she believed only she controlled. "This is selection bias. You're clipping the most sensational bits." "It's a wedding," I said. "If I wanted sensational, I would have invited your investors." The slide after that was a line I found in a draft outline. Episode 3, The Test, Will She Love Vision Enough to Risk Comfort? There was a beat under it. Money is a metaphor. My father's handwriting flashed in my mind, the note he'd tucked with his will about oxygen. Some metaphors cut off air. I'll try it again, voice grainy. I messed up. Got away from me. We stopped recording weeks ago. I clicked to a time-stamped invoice from 5 days prior for post-production adjustments. The memo, clean OP's vocal hiss. We all looked at my mouth at once. It didn't hiss now. It was consonants and a refusal to be curated. Someone from L's family stood, a cousin, glossy, efficient, and asked too calmly, "Why not handle this privately?" It was a reasonable mask. It almost fit. Because privately wasn't working, I said. Privately got edited. Then I did something cruel and necessary. I played the voicemail to my mother. The de-identified voice said, "Heads up, your daughters agreed to monetize conflict. We're so excited to model healthy accountability." The word healthy snagged my anger and ripped it open. My mother wiped under one eye. Her napkin was already damp. "Stop." L's voice broke, finally unplated. It was almost enough to make me falter. Almost. I had asked him to stop months ago and he had nodded kindly and adjusted a tripod. "We can fix this," he said. "We'll take down the episode wheel." "There's no episode," C cut in quickly, then realized the sentence had a tail. Live. The tail whipped around and bit her. I could have ended it there. Taken off the mic, I didn't know they'd hidden on me metaphorically and literally. Walked out into the night and let the band play a concert for a room full of stunned donors to the Church of Face Saving. But there were 2 more slides in the envelope, heavier than the rest. I owed them daylight, and I owed myself the sound of the truth landing. Slide. A photo of a ring appraisal. The diamond was real. The setting wasn't. The appraisal included a note. Client asked to copy this mounting for content. Declined. The jeweler's signature curled like smoke. L looked genuinely confused. "I believe him. Some traps you set for other people spring on you as well. This one belonged to C." I had screenshots. A DM from C to the jeweler's social asking if they would collaborate on a reveal moment. The reply, "We don't do humiliation theater." C's laugh turned steely. "That was about a branded reel," she said, as if that clarified the morality. "We wanted a narrative reversal. You love storytelling, don't you?" It was rhetorical and it was a dare. The final slide was just text, a transcript excerpt where the producer asks, "Do we have legal on the inheritance angle?" And C answers, "If she says no, we clip around it and frame it as fear." L in the background murmurs, "She's not afraid. She just needs the right push." The producer says, "Great. Then it's a yes." I closed the envelope like a book returning to its shelf. The ballroom had the quiet of a library after hours. A child somewhere asked for cake and was rapidly shushed into whatever lesson adults wanted cake to teach that day. "Here's what I'm asking," I said. "Who am I to you? A fiancé or a pilot episode?" Al looked like he wanted to say both. His face did the math and found neither answer affordable. C tried to reclaim the floor with buzzwords. The floor declined the invitation. Finally, L pulled at his tie as if it had promised him an outcome and defaulted. "I love you," he said. "We got lost. We thought if people saw us fix hard things, it would help them fix theirs." "Then why did you break something you didn't own?" I asked. He flinched at own, and I knew I'd nicked the hidden artery, entitlement dressed in mission. My mother stood. She isn't dramatic. Her version of loud is using full sentences to say, "I'm disappointed." She put her hands on the back of her chair. Her voice landed like a gavel wrapped in velvet. "We can have a wedding when the truth is invited." Her sentence opened a door inside me I didn't know was locked. I turned to the manager and asked him to unlock the actual doors. He did, slow, like he was giving us a chance to change our minds about everything that had happened. No one moved. The band, bless them, began to play the quietest song in their catalog. I looked at L one last time as a fiancé. I wanted him to reach the part of himself that existed before applause. I wanted him to say in plain language, "We were wrong. We will undo this." Not because the content failed. Because it was cruel. Instead, he held out his hands empty as if absence were proof. "We can still," he started. "We can still what?" I asked. "Teach people how to step over someone and call it accountability?" His sister pivoted to salvage. "You're over-indexing on optics," she said, not to me but to the room. "The story is bigger than a few missteps." "The story," I said, "is a person." And then Elle's father stood, retired, stern, the kind of man who talks with the certainty of dashboards. He cleared his throat in that generational way. We all waited because that's how we were trained. He looked at his son, then at me. "No show is worth this," he said. "Shut it down." She inhaled through her nose like an athlete about to sprint. Elle blinked a long blink, and when he opened his eyes, he was finally in the same room as the rest of us. "Okay," he said. "We'll shut it down." "Now," I said. "Now," he echoed. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling like the first time he'd reached for mine, and typed a message in a thread named with the pilot's acronym. His thumbs hovered, then moved. He hit send. His shoulders slumped like a tent coming down. She stared at him like he'd set fire to a currency she valued more than vows. "Is that enough?" he asked. I looked at the envelope. I thought about mics in guest rooms and signatures that weren't mine and a ledger that counted my love as inventory. "It's a beginning," I said, because endings sometimes look like that. Then the manager, quiet for the past 10 minutes, approached, hat in hand. "There's one more thing," he said softly and slid a second envelope, thinner, across the linen. "This came for you earlier. I was told it might clarify." The handwriting on the front wasn't the manager's or C's or the producer's. It was familiar and careful. My father's lawyer. My fingers stopped being fingers and turned into electricity. I opened it. A single-page letter. I read the first line and forgot how to stand. My father had written the letter a week before he died and instructed his lawyer to release it, if and only if my daughter is about to sign anything that puts her inheritance on a schedule she cannot set. The man planned for floods even in drought. The letter's paper smelled like an old book's spine. The first line. "If they ever try to make your love a ledger, remember who taught you to count." The ballroom leaned in without moving. The band, sensing a prayer, went fully quiet. I read on. He hadn't named people. He never wrote like a gossip column, but he named patterns. He wrote about charisma that treats other humans like raw material. He wrote about the difference between partnership and packaging. If someone calls your boundaries fear, tell them your boundaries have names and birthdays. He ended with a thing he'd told me when I was 9 and refused to apologize for not wanting to share my favorite book before I'd finished it. No is a complete sentence, and often the kindest period. I folded the letter and didn't hand it to anyone. It felt wrong to make it communal. I tucked it into the envelope and slipped both into my bag like the opposite of a mic drop. More a promise to myself than a performance. I looked at Elle and said, because there was nothing else honest to say, "I can't marry you today." The sentence didn't explode. It landed and sat. I expected a gasp, a crash, something theatrical. Instead, the room did what rooms do when someone tells the truth. It adjusted. He nodded, face streaked, jaw unclenched. "Okay," he said. "Not bargaining. Not pitch deck. Just okay." His sister whispered his name like it was the last card in her hand. He didn't pick it up. She turned her attention to me, composed fury wrapped in silk. "You'll destroy everything we've built," she said. "I didn't build it," I said. "I was mined." She opened her mouth to argue the semantics of exploitation, and I realized there was nothing in that debate for me but a graduate seminar in why I should have accepted less. I shook my head. "We're done." The doors were open now. People started to stand, chairs sighing. The air moved again. My mother came to me and put her forehead to mine the way she did when I was small and grief was a fever you could cool by touch. "We'll go home," she said. Elle stepped forward. "I'll take down everything," he said. "The files, the backups. I'll send you proof." He was trying to build a bridge in a forest he'd set on fire. But fire doesn't make land unlivable forever. It just insists on new growth. I nodded once. "I expect it," I said. She laughed, a small brittle thing. "Even if he does," she said, "the idea exists. Someone else will do it. You can't kill a market by refusing to be in it." "I don't want to kill a market," I said. "I want to stop mistaking it for love." We left the ballroom not in a run, not in a storm, but in a line of people carrying their respect for me like something fragile and useful. On the way out, the manager pressed my hand with a quick, professional warmth. "Good luck," he said, and meant it. I wish I could tell you that was the last scene, that the credits rolled, that I went home and slept 12 hours and woke up to a world where my name wasn't in any shared drive. But real endings are rarely a single door. They're hallways. That night, 6 messages from unknown numbers, some disappointed, some weirdly hungry for more content, one telling me I'd wasted a platform. I powered down my phone and sat on the floor with my mother and ate wedding cake with our fingers. We didn't toast anything. We didn't say to new beginnings. We just let sugar do one of the few jobs it's good at. Morning, an email from Al with 6 attachments labeled delete confirmations. Cloud links, storage receipts, a cleaned down note from the producer that said, all raw destroyed. I can't verify vaporization. I can verify that over the next week nothing leaked. C sent me a formal apology that read like it had been drafted by a chatbot trained on crisis PR. It included phrases like learning journey and regret any distress. She asked for a phone call to reframe. I did not call. I changed banks. I changed locks. I changed the names of a dozen digital things that had been named for both of us, even though only one of us had used them. I hired a lawyer with a laugh that cut through fog and gave her the envelope and the NDA and the joint account paperwork. She read. She underlined. She said, no judge will like this. She meant the forged signature. She meant the experiment. She meant the way consent had been treated like garnish. Alas, to meet. We picked a cafe. He came alone. He looked younger, like a magician after the audience has left. He placed his hands flat on the table and didn't reach for mine. I wanted to be good, he said, not as a defense but as a confession. I thought if we wrapped everything in intention, it would become ethical. Intention is packaging, I said. Ethics is what's inside the box. He nodded. He told me he'd pause the show indefinitely, which is a corporate word for, we smelled public backlash. He said he'd told C he was done. He said she'd accused him of being afraid of greatness. He cried in the way people cry when a myth they've been living in finally turns its back and walks into the ocean. I felt sorry for him, not in a way that excused harm, but in the way you feel sorry for a person holding a hammer they've been told is love. Do you hate me? He asked. I don't, I said. I don't have room for hate right now. I bought out the lease for boundaries. We talked for an hour. We didn't talk about getting back together. We talked about logistics and devices and the dog we were not going to adopt. He asked if he could send a letter to my mother. I told him he could send it to me and I would decide. He said thank you like a person offered a chair after standing in weather. A week later, C posted an inspirational slide on her professional account about choosing bravery over comfort. No names. 1,000 likes. A caption about narratives that threaten fragile egos. I turned off my screen. I went for a walk. I refused to let a sentence built like a weapon make a home in my head. Now to the part that makes this an actual AITA question and not just a long confession shaped like a runaway wedding. After the cafe, Elle's father called me. He said he'd suspended C from her role at the company for ethical discrepancies. He asked if I would provide my documentation to HR. He said, with the grim righteousness of a patriarch who discovered rot in the wood, that he'd asked Elle to step back from the podcast entirely and focus on repair. He used the word atonement carefully, like it might stain his tongue. He wanted me to know there would be consequences, that the family wasn't circling the wagons around bad behavior. I sent HR the files. A week later, I heard C had been terminated. Not suspended. Not reassigned. Fired. A statement went out about misalignment with core values. Elle moved into a sublet and texted me once to say he'd started therapy. I didn't reply. It wasn't cruel, it was jurisdiction. Here is the hinge. C's fiancé, yes she has one, called me. He said I'd ruined their lives. He said I'd torched generational opportunity. He said, and this is the part one can't stop replaying, you could have handled it privately. You chose spectacle. He called me a word men reach for when they're trying to make women small. I hung up. Then I lay there and started to wonder if the public nature of my reveal, the locked doors, the slides, the projector, made me the villain in a different story. I could have taken my evidence to a lawyer quietly and let a process grind without audience. I could have let the wedding implode in silence. I could have saved C's job by letting the reckoning happen on a weekday in a conference room without a band in the next room tuning to E. But here's the thing. Privately is where they built the machine. Privately is where the mics hit. Privately is where my no got edited into a maybe later. Publicly is the only room they had to admit weight and shape. The internet, if it ever meets this, will do what it does. Some will call me brave, some will call me an arsonist who wants applause. The truth isn't a vote. It's a spine. I don't know if I ruined C's life. I know she made a choice to stand a story on my back. I stepped aside. So, am I the asshole for exposing everything in the room where they had planned to turn my wedding into content and for giving HR the files that got C fired? Or did I just refuse to let my life be a pilot and choose to be a person with a mic that finally belonged to me?